means should you choose? Thank you, Kelly, for that. SALI is being implemented by some of the smallest companies in the world, like Thomson Reuters, like Lexus, like Bloomberg, like Net Documents, like iManage, like DLA Piper, like Gibson Dunn, just tiny firms, tiny companies. And the reason that they're adopting this is because we're both solving an internal problem for them and an external problem for them. The internal problem is that Thomson Reuters has said publicly, so I can say this too, we're working with a guy named Corey at Thomson Reuters. Corey's boss said, Corey, we have a problem. We at Thomson Reuters have 30 products, they don't talk to each other. Make them talk to each other. So he's like, gosh, I'm gonna have to create an ontology. That's really hard, especially since I'm not a lawyer. And he's like, oh wait, SALI has a really good ontology. And he's using SALI to be able to connect all 30 of his products, starting with Legal Tracker, moving on to HiQ, moving on to the Thought Trace, which is the contract lifecycle management company. And he's marching through every one of his products, implementing SALI. And so we're solving an internal problem for Thomson Reuters, but it's also solving an external problem because Thomson Reuters has said, now Thomson Reuters can say to the largest law firms, hey, if you want to hit any of these 30 products, use the SALI codes. Because now you can use the SALI codes to hit all 30 of the products. So we're helping Thomson Reuters solve an internal problem, make them talk to each other, and an external problem, make all of my customers be able to hit all of those things using a common language. So that's the same problem that Intap has, same problem that Net Documents has, that iManage has. Really, everyone needs to be able to speak the same language without having to, once you move from one vendor to the next, transform your ontology. So this is the problem we're solving. Much like Amazon tags up their items, we're tagging up the law. So much like in Amazon, you get to be able to find and filter, to be able to say, all right, I want to find areas of law. I want to find all the matters that we've done with this kind of bankruptcy thing, or this kind of document. And then once you tag up the documents in the work, you can say, okay, I want to find all the flat fee things that we've done, all the engagement terms. All of these things are now standardized to be able to be used by these companies here. Once you do that, you solve really. To do this, you need to solve both for the substance of the law, that is substantive legal work, as well as the business of the law. Because when I was a litigator, the ABA task codes, people might know about the ABA task codes, the UTVMS, those are ostensibly used to say, how much does a deposition cost? And I would say, well, it depends. Am I taking the deposition, or am I defending the deposition? Or am I merely observing the deposition? That matters in cost. And then is it an expert deposition, or is it fact witness? Or is it a 30v6 corporate rep? That matters in cost. Is it a slip and fall, or is it a patent infringement case? That matters in cost. All of those things are not reflected in the UTVMS, but each of those things is reflected in SALI. Those reflect both the business of law, how much does it cost, and substantive law, what happens. So when you think, why does this matter to me? If you are involved in either the substance of law or the business of law, you should care about this because we're counting all the things that matter. So if you're in research, analytics, knowledge management, experience management, document management, litigation management, transaction management, all those management substantive areas, you should care about SALI. If you're in the business of law, if you do RFPs, if you do pricing, if you do flat fees, billing, you should matter. These matter because the billing side matters to the substantive side, and no other standard has breached that gap. So the way that we're doing this is through a Stanford tool called Web Protege. Web Protege uses another standard called RDFS OWL, the web ontology language, which is OWL for reasons that I'm not going to get into. So an idea of this is that there are areas of law that I would argue most people are familiar with areas of law. One of the areas of law is intellectual property law, and then the subtype of that is patent. So you might say, Damien, you're missing patent prosecution and patent litigation. Those are subtypes. And I would say, well, actually, not having those there is a feature, not a bug. Because SALI, even before I joined, Toby and company were smart enough to separate the area of law from the service that I provide as a lawyer. Should I get a patent? If so, then I can file a patent with the Patent and Trademark Office. Then I can license the patent. Then I litigate the patent. Then I deal with patent assets in bankruptcy. So that separation of patent law, the area of law, from the service I provide is really smart. Because if you might think, well, I want to make this patent litigation and patent prosecution as child of those things, you'd have to do the same thing for copyright litigation and copyright registration. Same thing for trademark registration, trademark prosecution, and that turtles all the way down. Here, one tag for patent law, second tag for filing with the Patent and Trademark Office. And now, with patent law, now that that's tagged as a thing, here is the unique identifier for patent law. This is the linchpin of what SALI is all about. Because with this unique identifier, you're going to use this to be able to communicate with all of the other companies that I just showed you a bit ago. So the idea is that if you want to say, show me all of the patent law things in DocAlarm, you could send me this unique identifier. It's going to come back. Send me this unique identifier, and I'll send you all of the patent law things. Send the same unique identifier to TR eventually, and they'll tag up all those things. Send the same unique identifier to Lexis, same identifiers to NetDocuments, to iMessage, to DLA Piper, to everybody. Everyone is counting the thing that is patent law and slapping the same unique identifier on it. And they are going to be communicating through what we're building, SALI API standard. So through the SALI API, you're going to say, here's a standardized way to be able to make this API call, sending this IRI, and then here's a standardized response that will come from DocAlarm and from Thomson Reuters and from Lexis. And if you want to call it patent direct, if you're in German, that's cool. That is a synonym. If you want to call it lay to patents, if you are, I think that shouldn't be, I think that's French. So we're going to change it to French. It doesn't matter what the labels are. Really, the only thing that matters is this identifier, because that's the thing that all of these companies are going to use to be able to respond to each other. So now that I can do that, you can be able to do some really cool things with the ontology. So say if I were to say something about Kobe Brown, that is false. And I do that pretty much every day. And so he can sue me for negligent misrepresentation. You might ask 3 lawyers, what kind of claim is negligent misrepresentation? Lawyer 1 would say, well, it's a negligence claim, obviously, and they'd be right. Lawyer 2 would say, well, it kind of is, but it's also a misrepresentation claim, and they'd be right. Lawyer 3 would say, well, it's kind of all of those things, but it's also a defamation claim because Damien is saying something false about Toby. So if all 3 are shareholders within your firm, how do you settle the argument between lawyer 1 and lawyer 2 and lawyer 3? And the answer is you don't, because it is a negligence claim. It is also a misrepresentation claim. It's also a defamation claim, and it is also a synonym is called negligent misrepresentation causing harm. What I've done is gone through all of the jury instructions for California, for Texas, for Florida, for New York, for Illinois, and I've normalized all the causes of action and all the variations on how all those causes of action are represented in all of them. And then we've slapped this beautiful, unique identifier on this. So if you have a case that involves negligent misrepresentation, you're able to pull this in. If you were to happen to get stuck in the Suez Canal, it would never happen, but if it would happen, you'd get sued for maritime negligence. So hypothetically, I'm now sued for maritime negligence. You can see that maritime negligence is a negligence claim. It is also an admiralty and maritime claim that is argued in admiralty court, which is related to the area of law that is admiralty and maritime law, which is related to the industry that is the transportation and logistics industry. So in this way, it is not just a taxonomy. This is a true ontology that says this is how all of the areas of law work together with the industry. So you can imagine if you are a law firm partner that says, hey, I have a new partner, I have a new client in the transportation and logistics industry. What have we done here? Because we've built this ontology, you could say, yes, we've done this maritime negligence and these 20 other things to be able to make that partner happy, to make that client happy. This is the way, this is the DNA of the law. This is the way the law fits together. And we're building it in a free and open source way. You might say, well, that's fine. This is a beautiful website, Damien, but this I work in code. How do you work this code? And I tell you that all of this is available in XML it's currently in GitHub. So if I go to negligent misrepresentation, here's the XML class for negligent misrepresentation. It is a type of negligence claim. It is also a type of misrepresentation claim. It's also a type of defamation claim. And another name for negligent misrepresentation is negligent misrepresentation causing harm. So this, now your coders are going to rejoice and say, oh, because it's XML and I have all the parentage, if you're Mike Bomarito, you could spin something up really quickly to be able to quickly run through the entirety of the thing because it's already in code. You don't have to be content with the website. You can be able to do all sorts of other things. So now, the way that you say, well, how do I implement this today? I've already got my ontology. I don't need to map it. And that's a problem that Intapp had too. So what Intapp did is they went through a bunch of websites for a bunch of law firms whose names you know. And they went through, and I'm going to hide those names, and they had areas of law on their websites. One of the areas of law, as I make this a bit bigger, is appeals to the PTAB. That one firm has called that an area of law. But that is not an area of law. The PTAB is the Patent Trial and Appeal Board. So the area of law is patent law. The service that you provide is the appellate service. It's an appeal after all. And the P tab, that's not an area of law. That is a forum in which you're doing these disputes. So you can imagine how much more helpful this patent service forum is to be able to say, show me all the patent things that we've done. Show me all the appellate things that we've done. Show me all the times that we've been in the P tab. So we're making this more granular in a way that this Frankenstein area of law is not granular. So really, as people are implementing, that is, as vendors are implementing, as firms are implementing, well, mostly they're taking their existing ontology, they're transforming it to what we have on the SALI side. Historically, that's been really hard because that's been a manual process that Jim and I have been doing the yeoman's work to be able to actually implement these things. But with Mike Bomarito and his tool, that is now far, far, far easier. So the idea with this is you can use now large language models to be able to do this kind of mapping in a way that is much easier. So let's go to anybody who's worked on OpenAI knows the platform. And so I'm going to make this a bit bigger. Within the platform, you could imagine, I want to be able to take really bad areas of law. So I'm going to be able to say, a law firm that is going to remain nameless calls their area of law garnishment. Garnishment, not an area of law. Garnishment is a remedy, that if I have a judgment, that's garnishment. Gas pipeline, not an area of law. That is a thing in the world, right? So take this kind of gross, ugly area of law list, and we give it the SALI set. We say, here are SALI's area of law. And we say to the large language model, hey, why don't you assign 4 area of law tags to the span of each source? And then put that in a table and provide the first highest probability in the first column, and then the lowest probability in the last column. And take a look at what happens. GPT is smart enough to be able to say, you know that garnishment thing? That sounds like labor and employment law. Gas pipeline? That seems like energy law. Health, homeowners association? That seems like real property law. And it's programmatically able to be able to map your garbage ontology into the SALI ontology as God intended, right? This is a way, a microcosm.
Yes, you did.
Yes, you did. Can I get an amen? So this is not just easy, it's trivial to be able to implement that. But you need a brilliant mind like Mike Bomarito to do this across the entire 13,000 tag data set that is SALI. And so what Mike Bomarito has done is to be able to take each of these things and then run them through a process. The process is, I'm going to show you in a moment here. Where is my PowerPoint? Well, before we get into the tool, let's go into some of the use cases for this. Imagine, what can I use this tool for? One is, I have a bunch of matters that I'm calling, say, shoplifting. Where does that fall in the SALI standard? Turns out that that's criminal law, is the area of law, and dispute is the service I provide. So you could tag up all your matters. You could also say, okay, this document is called a merger agreement. So what area of law is that? Well, it's transactional law. That's M&A. All my timekeeping matters. This is a patent litigation case. So you could tag up this as a matter. So you could run through all of these things, matter, descriptions, documents, and timekeeping. But that's just at the matter level. Now you could imagine saying, each of these things inside the document is also a SALI tag, verbatim a SALI tag. So if I were to make this a bit bigger, which I'm going to because it's a bit small, directors and officers is a SALI tag. Exchange agent is a SALI tag. Broker's fees is a SALI tag. So each one of these things, NetDocuments has announced that by the end of the year, NetDocuments will say to the user, hey user, we found these 25 SALI tags. You want us to tag these things up for you? And the user will say, yes, please. You could tag up the documents. You could also tag up time entries. Depositions is a thing that is verbatim in SALI. Contract, affidavit, statement of undisputed facts. Each of these things is a SALI tag. You could imagine running Bomarito's tool through this and going through all your time entries. Do you want us to tag these things up for you? Sure. This has become trivial and almost $0. But you can imagine, you can think of a name or two of a company that has done exactly what I've shown you here. Where's that business model now?
I just want to say, Damien keeps saying trivial, but this is actually a big deal.
The effort. The effort is trivial for a brilliant guy like Mike Bomarito.
Every step of the way, Damien's there.
This is, I mean, as we developed SALI, one of the pushbacks, so to speak, that I've gotten over the years is who's going to do all those tags? And I had always predicted that at some point the technology would exist that you could programmatically tax. We're there, we arrived today. And this is monumental, this is huge for the industry. So I just had to weigh in.
Yes, trivial is the wrong word, but I guess groundbreaking is the right word. So what does this mean, right? So now clients and firms and vendors, instead of using their own unique identifiers and have to translate between identifier to identifier, can now say, okay, now let's all speak the same common data language. Let's get rid of our individual identifiers, and then we're able to communicate between client, firm, and vendor. And then all the vendors can say, okay, if we're going to push and pull data amongst each other, let's use the SALI tags to be able to push and pull against each other. An example of this is Jason Barnwell of Microsoft. As we were sitting in his backyard, we were chatting about this. He said, I've got a problem where I want to be able to enrich all of my internal work product. And I want to be able to have my partner law firm be able to use the same tags so we can push and pull data to and from each other without having to map each other. And so he's requiring his law firms to be able to use the SALI tags to be able to push and pull data, because he's using his internal ontology as SALI to be able to push and pull these things. So this is the grand universal hope that all of us who have been around for a while, we had hoped that these companies here might actually talk to each other and work together. And that hope is not a hope anymore. Jim, and Toby, and I have been pushing a boulder up a hill, me for the last 3 years, them for much longer than that. The boulder is rolling down the hill really, really quickly. It used to be that Jim and I would talk maybe to 2 or 3 people a month. We're talking to 7 or 8 people a week. That is 7 or 8 law firms, some of the biggest law firms in the world, many of whom don't want their logos to be on here yet, but will soon be putting their logos on here. So if you have not yet adopted SALI, or if you have not yet considered adopted SALI, query whether you're behind or not. So it looks like David Cavian has a question.
First of all, congratulations for your work. Thank you. I want to just point out a few things that some law firms have been asking me that might be in the minds of other law firms. You can expand. So one, it's not SALI or nothing. You can have SALI plus your own ontology or taxonomy. You can combine.
That's right. So to repeat for the people online, the question is firms and lawyers that think about it's either or, either SALI or my ontology. It's not an or, it's and. You can have both. And really the way that every organization, not just most organizations, but every single organization already has their own internal one. And so you can use, for example, breach of contract is something that we at Dr. Alarm Fastcase, we have as that is our identifier. Breach of contract is a single word. That is our identifier. Of course, there's a SALI tag that maps to our internal identifier. So this idea is you don't need to throw out your internal taxonomy if you don't want to. In fact, it would probably break a lot of things if you threw out your internal taxonomy. But the biggest point is that you don't have to throw it out. You can merely map it using the Bommarito tool. And then that way you're able to have the best of both worlds. So in the Dr. Alarm side, if somebody says, give me all your breach of contract things, we do a translation layer where we say, here's the SALI tag for breach of contract. We translate that to our identifier for breach of contract. We find the thing, and then we're going to push it back out to them using the SALI identifiers going forward. So we keep our internal identifiers, but merely mapped to the SALI identifier.
We had one. Did you have a second?
Yeah, one more FAQ is, let's say, what? We're going to send you our sensitive, fill blank, time notes or whatever to your server, and that's why what you did is so awesome, because you don't have to send it to our server. You can take our code and put it wherever you want.
Thanks for mentioning that, because I have not yet shown the GitHub page. So if you go to GitHub and oh, I'm sorry. So the question is, if I have sensitive data, say narratives for timekeeping, maybe I don't want to give those to SALI. Maybe I want to be able to keep those internal and run those internally. So here's the SALI GitHub page, where everything that I've shown you, including the XML, is online. So the LMSS, the Legal Matter Specification Standard, the XML file that I just showed you is the lmss.owl. So this is the lmss owl file. So if you want to be able to ingest that owl file as XML, cool, do that. Run all the internal things that you want. All of the things that I'm going to be showing you in a second, that is the Bommarito tool, that is also going to be on GitHub. That you can be able to run, if you don't want to go up to OpenAI, like we're going up to OpenAI currently, cool, you can run Llama, or you can run whatever you want internally. Not Llama, that's right. That's Michael said that the provenance of Llama is a problem, and that is an accurate statement. But if you want to run whatever large language model internally that doesn't run up to the server, you can do that. We're building this as we're using Docker to be able to make this as modular as possible. So if you want to use SALI as a service, cool. Run us through the APIs. We'll run it up to whatever LLMs we decide. That's option one. Option two, run it internally. Cool, do that too. And of course, if you run it internally, there's absolutely zero reason why you would ever say, why would I not do this? If you were to say, no, I'm going to stick with my own internal ontology and I'm not going to build SALI. Okay, that's option one. Option two is to say, I'm going to not do the hard work of building an ontology. I'm just going to use SALI out of the box. And by the way, now SALI can talk to all these other companies out of the box, and I don't have to do a thing. That's option two. Why would anybody choose option one? It's like having a telephone that has not only one telephone in the world. You can't talk to anybody. And it's really hard. And it's not built as well as ours is. Why wouldn't you use the translation layer that Michael has built to be able to at least map to SALI so you can actually talk to the rest of the world?
So we had another, Mark.
I had questions about the tool, but are you about to show it?
I'm about to show it, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'll
All right, cool. Two ways to be able to access the tool. I'm going to show you first the user interface, the web interface, kind of a try before you buy. But really the web interface is making an API call to all the APIs. And so really the web interface, you might say, oh, the interface is ugly. And the reason it's ugly is because I designed it. And there's a version 2 that is going to be better. But it's even not ugly. It's really beautiful, if I say so myself. Right, if I do say so myself. So here is the search tool to be able to demonstrate the power of what this is doing. So if I, as a user, have some garbage ontology things like garnishment, so I'm going to copy garnishment, and I want to say, what is garnishment? Now it's parsing through this, making API calls to be able to say, what are the areas of law that this relates to? I, as a user, can select employment law. I can be able to select garnishment. See, and this is the bug that I was talking about, Mike. So this bug will be fixed. Garnishment is not a legal authority. Garnishment is an objective within the ontology. So there's a duplication there, but that's going to be fixed in exactly 20 minutes after Mike goes back and fixes it. Right, it's true. So anyway, so now I, as a user, have selected garnishment is a verbatim thing. And so you can see that we didn't need to use the large language model. We actually just used the label. If garnishment has to be able to say, boy, garnishment isn't showing up in this word employment law, but it is related. It says, now I'm going to run out to the LLM to be able to do this LLM. So the pipeline that we've created is really smart, again, created by Michael, is that you are, the first step is to do a fuzzy map. So to be able to say a fuzzy map to Jakarta similarity. And Mike, do you want to come up and explain the cool stuff that you're doing?
Sure, and we can talk through some of this. I know people are probably interested in the implementation. It is, as Damien said, on GitHub and MIT licensed like everything in SALI land. The idea is that we have all of the work that these guys really have done to put together the knowledge graph. There's the concepts, the labels, the definitions, the examples. And for many types of search, there's not even a reason to use an LLM, right? If employment law is verbatim what you're searching, then we can use the fact that there are labels in the ontology already today to just show you employment law in whichever concept area, whichever parts of the taxonomy they occur. There are definitions in parts of SALI. We're working on enriching SALI, so there's even more definitions and examples. Anytime there's an example of something and you search and the text that you search shows up in the example or a definition, we can also return that. In those two types of queries, the exact name or label or something that occurs in the definition, there's no need to send your data to OpenAI. There's no need to send your data to Palm. There's no need to send your data anywhere because you can instantly search the knowledge graph itself. Increasingly, I think we're going to be, we're going to work on enriching the knowledge graph so that it has even more internally that makes these searches even faster. Now, for some kinds of input, the language is not just a label or a simple term, right? Like, let's say you're not just mapping from Team Connect or Elite or eCouncil, you're taking a timekeeper narrative that's a little bit longer and a little bit more abstract. That's where the LLM really comes into play and really helps to interpret this sentence or two sentences, or even in the limit of full document, and to turn that into either a list of tags, a hierarchy, or maybe annotations for each word that you input there. And the key here is we've tried to build the thing that's on GitHub and that you all can use in a way that's modular. So you can, for example, turn on or off the large language model. If you don't want to use OpenAI, or you want to use a local version of some LLM you run through Hugging Face or T5 or whatever it is you guys have internally, you can swap out and use. And that's probably a good thing when you have information like I think we all do that's privileged or sensitive. But for so much of what we do, it's probably just easiest to use the SALI utility as a service, and we can kind of all benefit from the public information that we put there, improving the results over time too. So I don't know, what do you think? It's so hard for me to level set sometimes as to what people already understand about LLMs and what they don't, and how many of you maybe have already used them or are implementing. So I don't want to belabor technical points that people don't need.
Stay up here because they're going to be questions. But I would say that so to be able to see that this is a relatively using a fuzzy match to say that garnishment shows up and then Jacquard similarity. That's interesting, but maybe more interesting to use an LLM to be able to say, hey, why don't you annotate from this text, from this document, annotate all the areas of law, annotate all the legal concepts, annotate all the companies, all the industries. And then the input is draft motion to dismiss for breach of contract and breach of contract analysis, comparing New York law with California law and analyze the copyright issues, right? I litigated for 15 years. This is a typical kind of thing that I would do. Imagine that being marked up in HTML-like language. To be able to say draft, that's in SALI. That is a task in SALI. Motion to dismiss, that is a task in SALI, or that is a document in SALI. Trademark, that's an area of law. Breach of contract, that is a concept, that is an objective within SALI. So imagine having this full annotation that then you could be able to say, okay, now I'm going to output all the tasks and run that across the task API. Output all the documents, run that through the document API. And then to essentially do that kind of mapping on the back end. This is not science fiction. This is just the way the world is now. And so imagine every single document that you have, being able to run it through and be able to tag up all of these things at a granular level, at a sub-document level, at a word level, at a paragraph level, at a sentence level, and then be able to classify each sentence, word, concept, and tag it up in a way that, by the way, interoperates with all of these companies here. That's what we have today.
Just one more use case, which we haven't spoken about yet today, which is a lot of the examples you're giving after the fact tagging. Like, we have a document, we have the concepts, et cetera, et cetera. You can also use this technology to enter it right in the first place.
That's right. So for the people that are remote, we've been talking thus far about ex post facto tagging of documents. That is after the narrative, after the documents, after all these things have been done, tagging them up afterward. David Kamian brought up the good point that through the ontology, you could actually do a prospective way to be able to tag things up.
You're filling out an intake form.
Exactly.
An intake form. Right then and there in the form, you could suggest tags.
That's right. There's a patent in my name that is filed by TR, so I'm not speaking out of school, but you can imagine that patent talks about here are all the things that need to be done in a legal matter, whether it's transactional or litigation. A lot of those tasks are present in SALI. And so imagine I, as a user, have a Kanban board to be able to say, draft motion to dismiss for breach of contract in the Southern District of New York. And I move that Kanban board from to do, to doing, to done. You can imagine maybe that could populate a narrative to say, drafted a motion to dismiss for breach of contract in Southern District of New York using all the SALI tags, and now I don't have to write narratives anymore because it's already tagged on the front end prospectively rather than reactively on the back end. That might be worth some money, but we're making it free.
Okay, now my question. So regarding the tagging tool, what are the available inputs? Text, upload documents, URLs, etc. And what are the available outputs? Text, document, URL.
Next slide.
Next slide. So well, actually, we've gone through the user interface where I, as a user, have selected employment law. Let's finish up the user interface, and then I'll actually go to the API, which is what Laurent really cares about. He says, what is the input and what is the output? The input current state is different than the input soon. So I'll give you the input current state. Input current state is, it does best with sentences or sub-sentences. So the use case that we said is areas of law that are garbage areas of law like garnishment. Those are the best use case today. And so the input is short phrases, and then the output is on the user interface. I can download a CSV that now I'm going to pull it in here and be able to show you exactly what it is. So the CSV provides the inputs. As I make this bigger, come on, let's make it bigger. How do you view at 3,000%? We don't want 3,000. Let's do.
Just to add some color commentary, we are exploring how to make this available and what frameworks, because obviously at some point the volume of data is going to create issues and costs on the SALI side. So we are, part of this we are figuring out. But as you're seeing here, we're figuring out as we go. So the answer that we can give you today is incomplete, but we want to figure out ways to help a broad audience as we can.
That's right. And the Agile is something that has taken hold in most of your companies. Mike Bomarito is the most agile guy I know. So I'm wagering by the time we go home tonight. Right, it's true. With age, we're less agile, but I would say he's more agile than most. But so there's what is today and there's what's soon. And soon is going to be, so what is today? Today you get the narrative in column A. This is what is the input. You have what level 1 node, area of law or legal authorities. You have the unique identifier, the IRI. You have the name of the thing, which is of course less important. You have the match that it is. If there's a definition that goes there, it says whether it went to the LLM or whether it did a fuzzy match. And then it has the score that Michael Bomarito, he really said using an ensemble method, what is the from 0 to 1. So this is 70% certain that garnishment is an employment law, and then 0.5 certain about legal authorities, and that's because it's actually an objective rather than a legal authority. That's the bug that we're going to be fixing.
So here comes more color commentary. A lot of the pushback I've seen on large language models is, can you trust the output? You know, because we've heard about the hallucinations and stuff like that. This is truly brilliant. By putting a score on it, tells you how much you should trust it. And I haven't seen that in a lot of implementations. So if you're looking at it, well, how sure are we? So this takes me back to my e-discovery days when lawyers go, well, we can't trust the predictive coding stuff. And I'm like, what's the quality of human coding? And they go, well, I don't know. We got a score here. So this is an added benefit and an incredible feature.
Yeah, and then the score on the user interface, it's green if it's high, orange if it's not, so you can quickly tag it up. And as I said, this user interface sucks because I designed it. The user interface of version 1.5 is going to be much better, and I'm guessing we're going to spin that up fast. So current state of the output is I on the web interface to be able to output a CSV. Of course, this works well for 10 or 20 or 30 things, doesn't work well for 10,000 things. So really this user interface here is actually using, we built an API first. So Michael built the API before he built the user interface, and the API is actually hitting the user interface. So let's now go to the API. So here in Swagger is the aspects of the API. You can see all the endpoints here that you have area of law, you have asset type. I'm going to make it a bit bigger for those who can't see as easily. Area of law, asset type, currency, data format, document artifact, etc. So for each one of these things, if I want to be able to run an API call, so I'm going to make this actually bigger like this. If I want to run an API call for document, and I've got a thing that's called motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction, and I enter that into the tool, the output is motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction. Here's the IRI for that motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction. Here are the parents of that. It's both a dispositive motion and a pretrial motion. The children of it, motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction, I forget what the child is, but that's the IRI for the child. It gives it the score from 0 to 100, so it's 100% certain that this is the right tag. And then it has, motion to dismiss for lack of personal jurisdiction. That's the child. So if you want, I as a user could be able to push this API JSON into my user interface, and then I as a user could be able to essentially replicate this user interface internally. Or I could just ingest it. And if there is a score of maybe 0.9 or 1, you could just ingest it programmatically. If it's lower than that, you can set whatever threshold you want to say, I want to be able to have a human have eyes on anything with 5 or above, or anything with 7 or above. You set the threshold, and you're able to do that. So I hope that answers the question. What is the output today? Either CSV on the web interface or JSON on the API interface, and the JSON is well annotated, as you can see here. Other questions?
So you mentioned extensible and all that content data. So those holding large volumes of content that are now hooked up to the API that be pulled into SALI so that it can be retrieved by other.
I'm going to repeat the question for the people at home. So the question is largely for their non-matches. You can imagine that there would be inputs that would not be matched, and you could imagine that. Wouldn't it be helpful to be able to say, if the system knows that there's not a match, that's maybe something to add to SALI to make the entire system better. So we've been talking about the kind of give a penny, take a penny, that if you're using SALI as a service, that is the SALI hosted API, then we'll maybe collect both the matches and the non-matches. If we can go through periodically every day, week, month, et cetera, and look at the non-matches and say, oh, that's a really good one, right? That's actually something that should go into the standard. And then we'll essentially be able to continuously enrich. If you trust us, which I think you should, because we're a nonprofit and volunteers for a nonprofit trying to make the world better, right? But if you don't trust us, you can run it locally, right? Just run it on your own system. We don't get that give a penny, take a penny. You can keep it to yourself. But I think most of the areas of law, I've talked to enough law firms that there's no snowflake area of law, right? There's no snowflake document set. There's no snowflake clause set. We haven't yet talked about, but there's a bunch of groups that are in SALI that are moving forward. One of them is a contract group. So Noah Weisberg is helping lead, or at least has donated all of his document types. Noah Weisberg has donated all of his clause types. And now I've normalized that with all of net documents types and clause types. And I've done that with also Contract Pod AI and Lex Fusion and all the Alex Hamilton. Everyone is donating their contracts. Now we have a working group that's going to say, okay, is force majeure the same as or different than act of God? Force majeure, act of God, same, different. We're going to hammer out those differences. If it's the same, we're just going to make it a synonym. If it's different, it's a relationship. So anyone who thinks that their document list or their clause list is proprietary is wrong, right? Everyone's counting the same things. We're standardizing contracts. We're also standardizing the API. What is the standard API call using SALI standard? What's the standard API response using the SALI standard? We also have a bankruptcy group. We have over 50 MLAW 100 bankruptcy partners that are all agreeing on what are the things that matter in bankruptcy. And we're tagging those things up. We're using next chapter from Fastcase as a base set. We also pull in everything from Pacer. We also have professors and partners in the largest law firms saying these are the things that matter. Immigration, ALA, the American Immigration Law Association, has now donated, I think, 20,000 things that matter to immigration law. We're ingesting that. A group from India. It turns out that India has more lawyers than the United States does. They have reached out to us. Now they're using the SALI standard. People from the UK, from Germany, from South Africa, from Australia. Jim and I talked to all these people and they're like, yeah, this works perfectly. It's worldwide. This isn't just US standard. One little thing that we had is that we have real estate types. One of the real estate types is hospitality. The UK folks said, hey, you're missing pubs. And so we added public houses as a subtype of hospitality. So it's really those edge cases that are the only differences. Everybody has murders. Everybody has breaches of contract. Everybody has patents. If you think that your taxonomy is a snowflake, you're wrong. And so you can either try to keep it a snowflake and have that telephone that doesn't talk to anybody, or you can get on board, because eventually you're going to need to get on board because your clients are going to require you to get on board saying, hey, why do you have that stupid bespoke taxonomy that can't talk to everybody else? So you can do it now and contribute to the standard, or you can do it later and make it more painful and kick the can down the road. I think there's really only one choice, really.
So if you're getting sense that I'm interjecting because we're running long. Is that the people up here in Ron, we're moderately passionate about this. If you haven't noticed. And I, many of you who know me know I have my hands in a lot of things. This far and away will have the deepest and longest impact on the legal industry of anything else. Like we were talking about this before, I see this as foundational, as a necessary condition for real innovation to occur. So it's, again, and I don't know how much more you have. I
only have one other thing, and it actually relates to the foundational aspect of it. you can imagine that there are three kinds of standards. People say, well, are you standardizing? I think that we need to clarify our language on what a standard is. The first is a metadata standard, and that's SALI. We are standardizing tags like merger agreement and also clause type, force majeure, right? Those are tags. But what is a standard merger agreement? Or what is a standard force majeure clause for the entertainment industry in this area, right? What the language of the thing is not what we're dealing with. We're merely dealing with the thing that there is a merger agreement and there is a force majeure clause. And then the cures of the world and the others can then take those and be able to then say, this is what's market for these things. So that is the content standard. Bond Terms is doing the NDAs, right? One NDA is doing the same thing. And then there's process standards. What are the standard steps to be able to do this task? This is almost like practical law, right? We're not chasing that either, right? We're saying, what are all the tasks? So we're counting all the tasks and we're doing all the doc types and that kind of thing. So we're kind of a component to that process standard, but we're not those things. We are merely metadata, we're tags saying, here are the things in the world that you need to think about. And then you can apply those to the content standards. And so how does that work out? You can say, okay, this is a merger agreement, right? And here are all the tags in here. You have to tag them up. And then you can collect all the things that are tagged force majeure in all the merger agreements. And then once you tag them all up, you can just run a statistical analysis through an LLM or otherwise, saying what are the most statistically likely things to be said in a force majeure clause in a merger agreement. Then you have your answer. What's market? Stop arguing about it because it's now been tagged up and now you're able to be able to say what is linguistically most common. You don't have the, hey, my thing is right, your thing is wrong. There's data that can be applied to this thing. And we're tagging the data. And this what's market as an argument shouldn't be an argument. That's what I was going to say.
Okay, thank you, Alan, for hosting us today. Is there a question?
Yeah, just one thing. It's not so much a question as just for you to get out there and talk about. So one of the things that I heard over the last couple of days was that people say, well, with AI and with the ability to just read the documents, you don't need anything like SALI and LegalWeek, which for me, who's got my MLIS, I'm just horrified. But what are you, how are you, I mean, I'm doing the footwork here, so I'm talking to people about, well, you don't work with taxonomy, but I would like to see and hear what you have to say about that.
That is probably one of the best questions that is ever asked, so thank you for that. And to repeat it for the people at home, the question is for people who say, well, with large language models, you don't need tags. Why do you need tags if I could just ask a question and get a response? And the reason is because that is asking questions of the world, and that's how hallucinations happen, right? That is how the false things happen. But everyone who has worked with LLMs for the last few years has known that if you ask things of the world, then that sucks. That output is awful. If you ask, say, for these 20 documents, give me a summary of these 20 documents, that output is really good. How do you collect those 20 documents? SALI. Because that is merger agreement, force majeure clause, right? You have to have something, a skeleton upon which to put the flesh of the LLM to be able to hang on that. To be able to say merger agreement, force majeure clause in the entertainment industry. Now that I've constrained it, saying, okay, what is market for those things? The LLM can go through that now constrained set, that is the SALI constrained set, to be able to give you answers. That's answer number one. Answer number two is to get analytics. Try to ask a large language model, what are the odds of winning a motion to dismiss for breach of contract in the Southern District of New York? Good luck with that. But if you've tagged up motion to dismiss, breach of contract, Southern District of New York, Docket Alarm can give you that today. And by the way, Docket Alarm is tagged with all the SALI tags today. Eventually, everybody else will too, but we're doing it faster than everybody else because I'm helping build it, right? You need tags to be able to give analytics. You need tags to constrain the data set. You need tags for the filters on the left-hand side for the user to say, I want this kind of document and this kind of clause. Those filters are tags. The large language model isn't going to give you those filters. That's SALI.
There are other problems with large language models, which everyone should know. First of all, it's only trained up to a certain point in time, right? So it's not current with our reality at any moment in time. It costs $5 million, $10 million every time you retrain it.
The numbers are changing dramatically day by day, and not all models are all fine. So it's not quite as simple. And I mean, this is one of the hardest things that we all, even as experts, things are genuinely changing dramatically quickly. even for those of us and in this space for a long time. Those are still very real concerns though, right? So many models have what's called a base model cutoff, and that is the end of their knowledge that's intrinsic. Some models include additional training, like if you've used OpenAI services, you may have been a part of some incremental training. And then other systems are grounded, like I think many of you've seen co-counsel or other systems, those incorporate other information that's past the cutoff window. And then there's other sources like our knowledge graph, which can be updated and used to ground queries in the system. So it's not quite a black and white thing about the availability or access to data, and I think you'll see Microsoft, for example's press release about model being a query, or Bard, Google's Palm or Lambda-based model yesterday, also having access to the internet will change because it has historically been the primary issue, but I think we all see the issues because there's more than 100 million people using this stuff in under 90 days, and so it will be rapid innovation, and I think we all just kind of have to get used to the rapidity and the volatility of this and get used to it.
And I would say that to also people that would say, hey, do you even need knowledge graph like SALI within areas of large language models? There's another company that does really good search. It's called Google, right? It turns out Google has a knowledge graph. It's more complex than our knowledge graph, but it's still a knowledge graph. Is Google going to get rid of their knowledge graph in favor of the large language model? No, it's and, not or. It's the knowledge graph and the large language model, not either one. Question here.
Yeah, this is really, really cool. Thank you all for doing this work. Just quickly, could you say like how we can access the UI, how we can access the API if we can currently, if not, what the plans are?
What you see on the UI that you see on your screen was just a glimmer in my eye as of 3 weeks ago. Michael and his team spun this up super fast to be able to talk to you all today. So current state is the URL is under Kelvin Legal. And by the way, shout out to 273 Ventures. They have done Yeoman's work. They've run, Mike, you can tell me how many, but I think like over 200,000 API calls to OpenAI. It costs $7, but still, but he's footed the $7, and also, but he's also spun up. Right, Turbo, that to be clear. But so we spun this up really quickly to be able to show you here today. It will eventually have different URLs to be able to access. It'll be under the SALI.org umbrella eventually. And then the other thing that that you also want to be able to do is the GitHub page here. If you go to SALI.org today, there's a link to the GitHub page that I'm showing you right now. And so you could be able to see that you can just go right to both.
It's Docker Hub too, which is probably even easier.
The API Swagger docs for those.
The open API spec is there, and then, I mean, it's all inside your Docker.
Well, I'll answer it this way. Register on the SALI website and you get updates on this as it's available. SALI.org.
And that actually registration brings up another good point. The way that we do these collaborations is through Web Protege, which is a Stanford tool. They originally did it for biomedical reasons. We're using it for legal reasons to transform the legal industry. You can see here that within this, if you have a comment on maritime negligence, you could say, Damien, this is the stupidest thing on the planet. Why in the world would this be? Don't you know that maritime negligence belongs as this? Somebody else gets the email and says, yeah, that is stupid, Damien. And I'm like, all right, it's stupid. Where should it be? This is where we do communications. So if you want to be able to be part of this communication, part of this discussion, sign up at Web Protege. And the link for Web Protege is on SALI.org, which is somewhere in one of my many thousands of things. Sign up at SALI.org, give us the username for Web Protege, and then you'll be able to comment on this thing, be able to get updates on this thing, and that's the way that we get consensus amongst all the folks. As soon as we get consensus, it goes out the doors, version 3, et cetera, and we keep iterating.
Kelly is reminding you to check the notes on the Teams channel for questions.
Good. I'm now checking this Teams channel for questions. In the chats, is there another microphone available in the meeting room? Hard to make out what was being said. There are 4 microphones, so maybe one of us can have a roving microphone to be able to hand to folks if they ask questions.
We need to
All right.
I gotta get to the board.
That's right. Mike came here this morning, is now making the round trip. It's the best commute of the day, I think.
tell them to feel free to reach out to me, the SALI site with questions.
Yes. So if you do have questions, I'm pulling up SALI.org. There's the contact here. So here's contact. Contact us. Send us an email with questions. Here's the instructions for going to Web Protege. You can explore with the SALI user. This is kind of the dummy username and password to kind of get your sense of it. But if you do want to make comments, please make your own username to be able to do that. Here's the GitHub link. Here's an Excel version, but don't use the Excel version because it doesn't provide the ontology like God intended. If you see Excel, you're going to be disappointed. Don't be disappointed. Use the Web Protege version, and you will be less disappointed.
Thanks everyone for coming. This is probably the most exciting SALI meeting we've ever had. Is that correct? This is a groundbreaking meeting, so thank you. And we also have working groups beyond what Danny mentioned that we need help on. So, but we were talking about tech, but there is a mental and intellectual aspect of this still. Because we still have to build it, right? Taxonomy, so we're still doing that. So please feel free to pitch in and help us in that regard as well. So, thanks everyone.
We'll be around afterward. Thank you. Thanks to everybody online. See ya.